What's up everybody, I'm Jason and welcome back to some more tips and tricks for the Canon EOS R5. In almost every video in this series, I at some point end up walking through some setting that involves navigating through the Canon camera's menu system. However, one thing I haven't talked about in any of these videos is the menu system as a whole, how it's organized, and more importantly, how you can navigate it. Now, I think most people would probably consider this all super basic stuff, but of course, if you're new to the camera, maybe not so much. And even if you're not new to the camera or the platform, there may be some tips in here that you might find make your life easier. So let's start with a brief overview of the menu system as a whole. On the R5, and actually all of Canon's cameras, the menus are broken into a number of sections. Canon usually calls these tabs. Each of these sections have an associated icon and color. On the R5 and its siblings, these are the red shoot section, the light purple AF section, the blue playback section, the dark purple network section, the yellow setup section, the orange custom functions section, and the green my menu section. Now, each of these sections generally contain all of the settings that affect the respective aspect or operation of the camera. So for example, in the shoot section, you'll find things like the ISO, the white balance, and so on. Things that affect the images you're shooting and how the camera operates while you're shooting them. Another example, in the network section, you'll find controls over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections, and how your camera can talk to your phone or computer and the computers and phones that it's paired with. The two exceptions to this are the custom function menus and the My Menu sections. Now, the custom function section is in part a holdover from Canon's older firmwares and contains a variety of settings that affect everything from the camera's operation to what exposure modes you can use, the maximum and minimum shutter speeds and apertures you can select, all the way to the customization of your buttons and dials. Basically, if it customizes something on the camera and Canon couldn't figure out where else to put it that made sense, it probably got put here. Now, the other section that doesn't have any inherent order is the My Menu. And this is where you can create your own menus containing the functions that you use most often in the order that you want them to be in. So while there's no inherent order here, the order that is here comes from what makes the most sense to you on your camera. Now, each section is divided into multiple pages, and each page can have up to 8 settings on it, though not all pages will use all 8 of those setting slots. Now, all that said, the menu system is one place where Canon's firmware development legacy is clearly on display. As Canon has added new features, they add them using the UI design style that was current at the time of that feature. However, more often than not, as those cameras and styles get updated, those features don't get updated to use more modern UI design styles. So as they change, old things kind of stay the same. For example, the beep and video system settings here use a drop-down style menu. And this is what Canon used pretty much for everything back in the late 2000s when they first started doing DSLRs. However, other settings with a similar number of options, for example, the touch control setting here, open on a completely separate screen. And some of these submenus or screens will include help, other graphical elements, specific buttons, different UI designs, etc., all depending on what that function is, what it does, and when it was added to the camera. Now, of course, to get to the menu system, you press the menu button. On most cameras, you'll find this on the back of the camera above the rear screen to the left of the viewfinder. However, at least in the case of the EOS R5C, it's on the bottom right corner on the back of the camera down by where the battery door is. Additionally, on many of Canon's R-series mirrorless cameras, you can program any of the programmable buttons except the shutter release and multi-controller to also open the menu using the button customization setting on the Custom Functions 3 menu page. When you press the menu button, the camera will display the menus on either the rear LCD or the EVF if it's active. So yes, you can do all of the menu stuff through the EVF if you desire. Additionally, if an external HDMI monitor is connected to the camera, the menus will be displayed on it instead of the camera's internal displays. Now, when you press the menu button, what the camera does depends on the previous state of the camera, or at least of the menus, and the menu display setting that's found on the My Menu Setup menu page. It's the last menu page in the My Menu section. If menu display is set to normal, this is the default, the camera will try to open the menu system to the last page you were using with the last top-level setting that you were using selected. The exception to this is when the menu entry or setting that you were previously on is no longer available. For example, when you change from movie mode into photo mode or vice versa, in which case the camera will revert to the default menu position, which is going to be the first setting on the first menu page of the shoot menu. Now, when the menu display setting is set to Display from My Menu tab, the camera will open the menus to the My Menu section instead. Now, if your My Menu section has multiple pages and the last place that you were working in the menus on the camera was in one of those pages, then it will open automatically to that page in setting, similarly to what it would do in normal mode. However, if you were last using a setting on another section in the camera will open to the first page of your My Menu section. Now, because of this, when customizing my Menu, if you decide to customize yours, I recommend putting the most used settings on the first page, since this will likely be the one that comes up most frequently. Now, the final option for the menu display setting is the Display Only My Menu tab. When this is selected, all of the menu sections except for the My Menu section will be hidden. Needless to say, this is probably not what most of us want to use on our cameras. However, one place where this can be useful is when you want to make it more difficult to accidentally change settings. For example, if you shoot events or a wedding weddings as a team using a shared team pool of cameras, you might want to put the settings you know would need to be changed during the course of a shoot in the My Menu, and then hide all of the rest of the menus from the camera to keep people from accidentally changing something else and ruining shots. And this brings me to navigating the menus. There are quite a few ways to get around in the menus, and not all of them are necessarily obvious. Now, to start with, if your camera has a touch screen and touch is enabled, then you can simply touch the section, page, or setting that you want to navigate through the menus. However, touch isn't the only way to navigate the menus. You can also use the dial, multi-controller, cross keys, and the quick control button. So let's start with the dials. On Canon's cameras, the dial just behind the shutter release is called the main command dial. The one on the back of the camera, usually down somewhat, is called the quick control dial, and the one on the top, if there are 3 dials on the camera, is the second quick control dial. Now, if the camera only has 2 dials, they will be the main and quick control dials, and if the camera only has 1 dial, it will just be the main dial. In the menus, each of these dials have a specific navigational function. The main dial changes the page 1 page at a time. When you reach the last page in a section, if you can continue scrolling, the camera will just move to the first page in the next section. When you reach the end of the menu, the camera will wrap around back to the start. Think of this as scrolling horizontally through the menu system. The quick control dial changes the selected entry on the current page. So basically, this is the same as scrolling vertical on a menu page. Now, when you reach the first or last item on the page, if you continue scrolling, it will wrap around to the other side. Scrolling off the end does not change the next or previous page. Finally, if your camera has one, the second quick control dial changes sections instead of pages. Now, if dials aren't your thing or your camera lacks some of them, your next option is to use the multi-controller or cross keys. For both of these controls, pushing to the left or the right changes the menu page, and pushing up and down changes the selected item on that page. Now finally, the quick control button. Pressing this will cause the menu to jump to the next section to the right. When you reach the last section, it will wrap around back to the beginning and continue. So now that you've navigated to the setting you want to change, you need to select it and change it. Now, if you are using the touch interface, as soon as you touch the setting, its submenu or options will be displayed. If you're using physical controls, you will need to press either the Set button, which you will find in the middle of the quick control dial, or your cross keys, depending on what your camera has. Or if your camera has a multi-controller, you can press straight in on it for the same functionality. And this brings us to saving settings. While settings in the quick control and dial function menus update instantly when selected, almost every setting in the menu system requires you to confirm the change to apply it. To do this, you could press the Set button, either the physical one or the virtual one if it's presented. However, you can also press straight in on the multi-controller, which also acts as the Set button, or touch the selected entry a second time to apply that change. Now, since most settings in the menu do require you to confirm them to save them, you can also cancel out of making a change by backing out of the menu page. This is done by pressing either the physical or virtual menu button on the screen, or by half pressing the shutter release or the image playback button. Which brings us to the last operation, getting out of the menus as a whole. And there are actually several ways to go about doing this. But the big get me the heck out of the menus and back to shooting right now button is the shutter release. You can half press the shutter release anywhere in the menu system and the camera will immediately return you to shooting. This also applies to the image review mode as well. Half pressing the shutter release while you're reviewing images will take you directly back to shooting. In fact, if you have your shutter release set to metering and focus start, when you half press it in the menus or image review, the camera will start metering and automatically trigger the AF system. So you can literally press the half shutter release, get out of the menus, and then go take a picture. Now for back button focusing users, it will only start the camera's meter, it won't do the autofocus. You can also use the image review button to exit the menus and go back into the image review mode, which is important in a second. Now, your other option to get out of the menus and settings as a whole is to press the menu button. For submenus, there will usually be a virtual menu button available for you to use on the touch screen. However, from the top level of the menu system, only the physical menu button is available. Now also note, if you entered the menus from the review screen, when exiting the menus, you will be taken back to the shooting standby mode, not the image review. So if you are in the menus and you want to go back to image review, you'll have to hit the image review button for that. So that's the who, what, where, and how of navigating Canon's menus, at least on their consumer cameras. It is slightly different on the Cinema EOS OS cameras. Now, if you found this useful or at least interesting, let me know by hitting that like button and sharing this. If this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you aren't already. Finally, if you'd like to directly support this channel and future videos like this, please consider hitting that thanks button if you can, or buying yourself something you've always wanted from one of the affiliate links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.